This workbook contains a macro that retrieves data from a separate file, copies it, and deposits it at the bottom of the current one. It just runs as a one-shot deal. Doesn't make any decisions, doesn't ask for any additional information. If you did the exercise in the movie on recording a macro, you already know what its procedure is. What we'll do in this movie is we'll add 3 lines of VBA code to the macro that will ask your name, then enter it at the top of the worksheet so that the next person who runs the macro will know who used it last. Before we run the macro, there's a couple of things we have to do. Over here, if you have this yellow bar that says security warning, that's just Excel's way of telling you that, hey, there are macros in here that could be dangerous. Do you really want to run them? So click Enable Content. If you have that yellow bar and you don't enable content, you can't use the macros. Second thing we need to do is we need to open up the workbook that contains the data we're going to retrieve. So you could either press Ctrl-O to open or go to your File tab and choose Open. And in the Chapter 13 folder of the exercise files, let's open up this file here called Overseas Data. And you see it's the same structure as the other ones. We have an order number, the region, month, size, and quantity. So let's switch back to the other one. I'll press Ctrl-F6, or if you prefer, you could go to the View tab and switch windows. So let's go and edit the macro. Go to the Developer tab, and there's a few ways we can do this. Over here on the left, we have the button for the Visual Basic Editor. We also have the Macros button. Click that Macros button, and this shows you the macro that we wrote. It's called Get Data, and to edit it, just click this Edit button. It brings us into what looks like another computer program, and really it is. And you see up here, it's the Microsoft VB Editor. This VB Editor comes with Microsoft Office. You don't have to buy it separately, but you do have to install it. So if you don't have the VB Editor, you'll have to go and install it from your original disks. Now let's take a look at the code. I'm just going to maximize this window here so we can see what's going on. A couple of things is the macro starts off with this keyword sub, and it ends with end sub. Sub stands for sub procedure. All the code that you do in the macro has to be between the opening sub and the ending sub. If you put any code before or after the sub procedure, it'll give you an error. The first few lines here are in green, and you see they start off with an apostrophe, or call it a single quotation mark. These are comments. They're kind of like yellow sticky notes. It's information for you or anyone else who's going to read the code, but Excel doesn't try to execute it. Here's the code itself, and I'm not going to go into every single line of detail, but you can see it's pretty much human readable. Range A1 select. You can probably figure out that it means to go to cell A1, and that's what we did for the first task of that macro. So let's add those lines of code. Click at the end here where it says ActiveCell.select. Just click to put your cursor and hit the Enter key once or twice. Blank lines are perfectly okay. So we want Excel to ask us what our name is. Now, when it asks us our name, it'll display a dialog box. When we type in our name and click OK, our name has to get stored in a variable. So the variable that we'll create will simply be called your name. So type your name equals, and now we have to display that dialog box. So type in input box. Be careful, input box has to be one word. Open up your parenthesis, open up a double quote, and let's type in, what is your name? ? Close the double quote, close the parenthesis. Now, after you type your name and click OK, Excel has to decide where to put that information. So press Enter, and we're going to say range, and then open up a parenthesis, open up a double quote. We'll say A3. This is not case sensitive. Close a quotation mark, close a parenthesis, type dot value. By the way, notice as you're typing the word value, Excel recognizes that it's a legitimate keyword, so that's how you know you're doing it right. So you can type E or hit the tab key, and it'll continue. So we'll say range A3.value equals, and then open up the quotation mark, and we'll say data retrieved by, type a space, type the closing quote, and now what we want it to say is data retrieved by Bob, or whatever your name is. So we'll use an ampersand to append the data. Now we need to append that variable that contains your name, which we did in the line above, which is your name. One more thing, press Enter. Notice when I pressed Enter, the word range on the previous line went from lowercase to uppercase. That's a little bit of the VBA syntax checking. When you see it's changing case on you like that, that's also a way that you know that your syntax is right. And now we'll type range, open up the parenthesis, open up the double quotes, A1, close the double quote, close the parenthesis, dot, select. And now when I type SE, it recognizes the word select. And you see there's that little flying green brick next to it. That means it's something that's actually going to do. And I'll just press the tab key and let Excel fill in the rest. And just click anywhere else here, and you notice that when you do, if you type that range in lowercase, it'll turn to uppercase. That's all we have to do. Now, we want to get back to Excel, and you don't have to save what you did here because this macro is stored in the workbook. So there's no need to save the macro separately from saving the workbook. Now, one of two things you could do. You could leave this VBA editor open and go back to Excel, or you could close it. I just want it out of the way, so I'm going to click that close button there. Now we'll run the macro. Click in here, and you could use the shortcut to run the macro, Control-Shift-G in this case, or you could go up to the macros button here and run the macro. So you have two ways of doing it. So I'll click run. So it puts it in. It asks, what is your name? Type, my name is Bob. Click OK, and there it is. It deposits data retrieved by Bob, and now you can see it put the cursor in cell A1. If you scroll down, you can see down on the bottom, there's all the data from the overseas region. So you can see that even though we made just a small modification, you could see that VBA allows you to gather information from the user while the macro is running. It allows you to output data to any cell on the worksheet, and it also allows you to concatenate a pre-made phrase with the information that you enter. So hopefully you'll find this useful for your own projects.